Hi, everybody. It's me, Julia, and I'm here to interview another brilliant author. This is Adrian Lopez. He has written one and a half, well, you've written two books, right? Just one of them isn't quite published yet, the second one.
Yeah, actually have four out, but two major
Oh,
novella and a novel.
oh, fabulous, fabulous. Okay, so as soon as I'm done with that, I'm going to ask him to talk more about them, especially because your second book or your first book, I can't even pronounce that word, the one that starts with an L. Tell us about that one.
Yeah, like Cohen Bloodlines is my take on the
Okay,
werewolf. I'm a huge horror fan.
right?
Horror movies, I mean, since I was a kid. And I'm
Uh-huh.
old enough where I loved all the old Universal classics. And
Mhm.
then, the 70s was Hammer Studios doing their versions of it. And then all the horror today. But I've always loved the werewolf character. The werewolf character is always like a secondary character. It's always like
Uh-huh.
a sidekick. It's never really gotten its own main stuff. Yeah, they've done great movies on it, but it's never really been the character everybody knows, like Frankenstein and Dracula and
Right.
those. But it is a character that just has so much internal struggles that it's a great
Mhm.
character. It's a great foundation for a character. So
Right.
I really wanted to write my book, and my book is a completely different take where you don't need a full moon to change, and it's not by a bite or a curse. It's
Uh-huh.
completely different, and that's what I always like to do in my books. Is just
Mhm.
come from a completely different angle with them.
Hmm. I like that. I like that a lot. And how long did it take you to write this book?
It took me. I actually write fairly fast because,
Mhm.
a lot of the times, just the way I think, most of the stories in my head, right? So when I
Right.
sit down, it just comes out, and then, of course, you go back and clean it up and go through stuff like that. But
Mhm.
it probably took me, I would say, 4 months total to do the full writing and get the story finished. Um, it flowed very naturally for me. It just, like I said, the whole story was kind of there, and I'm not a plotter. I don't like to outline or anything. I just like to let the story go, and for me, that just works very smoothly when I do that.
Wow, that's what a gift because I'm such an overthinker that if I don't have everything, if I don't know where I'm going, I will end up in Switzerland somewhere having, toast with a redhead from Nigeria. I mean, it's just like, my characters just dart off at every chance they get. It's almost like they're imprisoned by me and they're trying to get
Yeah.
away. So you
Yep.
can just it just all flows out. And so when you said 4 months, is that 4 months to draft and revise and ready for action?
That was for draft, revise,
Okay.
and get it ready for editing, right? So that was my whole take of saying, okay, this is ready to be edited. Then the editing takes maybe another month or so for them to go through it and me to go back through it. But
Right.
yeah, I mean, I enjoy doing this. I've written since I was a kid,
Uh-huh.
but it's always just been for me. It's never anything I shared. Always have done poetry since I was a child, but again, not for anybody, just me writing stuff down and just keeping it.
What made you decide to make the jump in sharing?
Well, it's part of it is like I said, I have four things that are actually published, right? So I
Uh-huh.
published a romance short story that's ebook only. And
Uh-huh.
then the main one is I did a children's book that was dedicated to the memory of my daughter because my wife and
Right.
I had fertility struggles for a year. We did all the different treatments, which, is just, it's a drain in terms of money, it's a drain
Right.
emotionally. And we had finally got pregnant, but we lost her during term, right?
Oh,
So
I'm so
at
sorry.
that point, after years of that, because again, for
Right.
the ones that don't know, it's a roller coaster monthly.
Right.
It's not something that you can take time to recover. It's like, okay,
Right.
next month you have the highs and the lows again, right? So
Right.
we finally just said, okay, we tried everything. It's just maybe not, it's not meant to be. So we said, okay, we're just not going to go forward with that. But we
Mhm.
still wanted a way to try to heal that, right? Or some way
Right.
to help with that, right? Because it's
Mhm.
difficult. And my wife knew that I love writing. So she said, why don't you write something? Why don't you do a children's book? Right. And I said,
Mhm.
okay. So my book is basically me telling my daughter, whose name would have been Juliana, bedtime stories. Right. And I said, I would have told her the bedtime stories anyway. So
I'm not gonna cry.
let me do this. And the way I came up with it is basically the two most important people in my life were my grandparents, right? They're the ones that molded me to who I am. Everything
Right.
I believe, my work ethic, everything is really for them.
Ah,
And in my books, and I'm going to do a bunch of them, but in my books is basically me telling her a bedtime story of my, experiences as a child with my grandparents. And the first one was basically called the camping trip because every year we used to go to Yosemite, and
mhm,
that's the first one, right? So
right.
as I was doing this, as I was going through this, and as you know, when you write, sometimes you pull from experiences or memories, and
Right.
sometimes it's healings, but it's sometimes it's difficult. As I
Right.
was doing this, I really started saying, like I said, I've always enjoyed writing, and I said, why don't I just do some more of this? Why don't I just keep letting it come out? And the natural progression for me was horror because again, that's what I love. That's really my influence in general. And then I just started writing this, and it's interesting because I always tell everybody this werewolf book came basically. I was sitting down one day, and I had an image in my mind, almost like I
Mhm,
was looking at a painting of one
uh-huh,
of the scenes in the book, right? And it's a scene in the book where there's a bonfire and a bunch of werewolves, and I saw that and I go, I love that image. And I started writing that scene. And then from there, the story just kept going. Right. And
right.
everybody always jokes around like, yeah, those are my daydreams that I have. But that's what led to the story.
Are your books so I feel like somewhere I saw when I was looking around that it said something about erotic.
I
Are
have a
they
new one.
spicy at all?
These aren't right. So the horror are just straight horror. But the one I do have coming out in September, because again, I write and write and write when I can, right? I like to challenge myself, right? So like I said, my first book was a romance short story. And I said, I want to try to do this, right? Because again, I do a lot of poetry. So I said, why don't I try doing this?
Right,
The children's book was something a picture book is something I never did before. So
right,
out of my comfort zone, right? The horror is my comfort zone,
right,
but I know when you're on Book Talk and everything, how dark romance and romance in general, and definitely all the spicy stuff is
right.
popular. So I said, okay, let me try this because a couple of people had asked me, do you plan on writing any kind of dark romance or anything? And my wife said, why don't you write a romance? So me being me with horror, I said, okay, if I'm going to write a romance, I'm going to take it to the other side to do,
Right, right.
very dark. It's basically, like you said, it's basically a mix, probably leaning more towards erotic horror,
Okay.
but with dark romance aspects, right? And it's again me just trying to push my comfort zone and say, can I do this? How would I do it? Because again, I like to
Mhm,
come from a different angle. And
right.
all the beta readers have loved it. I mean, I've gotten nothing but positive reviews from
Oh, that's awesome.
everybody that have read them. They love my take because again, I
Right,
went over the top and I went very horror style with it, and they love it.
right. Oh, that's fabulous. And yeah, you're right. TikTok and Book Talk and Instabook or whatever they call it over there. It's like I never even heard of like romanticises
Yeah.
or, those things. And they are so popular. They are so
Yep.
popular, right? I mean,
Yep.
I have a bookshelf full of them. I'm usually a rom-com girl. That's what I read. That's what I write. Well, that's at least what my
Uh-huh.
first book was. And yeah, but my whole bookshelf is Sarah J. Maas and Rebecca
Yep.
Yarros and some of those. So it's interesting how we get influenced um, depending on the water around us, so to speak.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, it's
Yeah.
it's a good point because when I do my podcast, I always like to talk about the author's voice, right?
Hmm.
And I always like to say that every author's voice is different, and it doesn't matter
Right.
if you're all writing the same genre, even the same theme. It's
Hmm.
always going to be different because your voice, and like you said, the water around you, it's your influences, right? Everybody has different influences, what
Right.
they enjoy, what they've had, their environment, their upbringing, what they
Hmm.
love in terms of music, movies, art, literature,
Right.
whatever. And that makes every author unique. And that's why there should be no competition because there's no two the same, right? There you
Right.
can have all the different ones because it's always going to be different.
Yes. And so on your website, I saw the first book that you have, and then the next book that you have, and I saw the children's book. I did not see anything about the romance book that's an ebook. What's that called?
Yeah, I had so that one's called Temptation of a Succubus. And basically
Oh, I
again,
did. I saw some of the videos for that on
yeah,
TikTok. Yes.
I do post a lot of that. But that was again me saying, okay, how would I do this more horror style? And how would
Right.
I do this different? Right. So
Right.
basically I'm looking through Book Talk and all the videos and I'm saying, okay, they like dark, they like
Mhm.
spicy. Why don't I
Mhm.
just take it to level 10 all the way on both sides and
Right.
give them just a wild, crazy story from beginning to end? And
Right.
basically, the two main characters are a succubus demon, which is Camila,
Uh-huh.
and Emiliano, who's a basically a serial unaliver, right? And again, I
Oh,
say that because I don't want anything to be,
right.
whatever we
Censored.
post this over here.
Right.
Yeah,
Wherever
so
it goes. Right. Because here it
yeah,
wouldn't matter, but you never know
yeah.
anywhere else. Right.
So those are your two main characters, right? So basically, in my mind, I said those two main characters lend itself to being over the top, right?
Right.
And again,
Right.
because of who those two characters are, you can lean on the horror, you can lean on it being very dark, and you can lean on it being very spicy because it's a succubus and a serial and a liver,
Right.
right? So
Right.
I did it in a way where it just let me have no boundaries, no restrictions, and just let them basically do probably what they would do.
Right. Right. And that book was a novella. Is that correct?
That one will be a novella, yeah. That's right now slotted to come out September.
Oh, gotcha.
But for a lot of us indie authors and stuff, it's really funds, right? So
Right.
if
Oh,
if
right.
something happens where I could do the editing and everything a little earlier, because I have it all
Right.
kind of staggered and scheduled, it may
Right.
come out in August. But as of right now, it's scheduled for September.
Oh, wow. I am very interested in the I am extremely neurodivergent. It's hard for me. Everything about writing is hard for me. The mechanics, the brain part of it, the all of it. But the stories, right? It's like I'm a story brain. Yeah, like my brain is
Yeah,
constantly telling me stories, and writing seems to be the only way that it's giving me the option to get them out of me. But
yeah,
a whole book is difficult for me. So I'm definitely thinking about doing like a novella
yeah,
series.
yeah.
Um,
Well, it's
and
interesting because the reason I do that, and
mhm,
all my books, even if they're novel length, the Zombie Rise of the Z
mhm,
is a novel length, right? Right at the limit of what a novel should be, but I mean at the entrance level of it, but it's a
right,
novel length. But
uh-huh,
the reason I do that is because just in general, when you're thinking about everything, you're thinking about life in general. A lot
mhm,
of us don't have time, right? I have
right,
with work and the podcast and all the different things I do, there's
mhm,
very little time to write. So whenever I can, I do as much as I can. But then that leaves very little time for me to read, even though I have all these great indie author friends and stuff I want to
right.
read. It's
Read and help
difficult,
them.
right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So, as I started thinking about this, I was like, I don't have the time for big novels. I don't have the time to read or even write a hundred
mhm,
thousand, 130,000, and I'm sure I'm not the only one. So I always want to make sure my books are easily accessible for people that don't have the time, right? So my
right,
books can be read in a day if you want to just sit there and go through it. Can be read
right,
in a weekend easily, right? You don't have
right,
to spend a lot of time and just have to power your way through. Even when you love something, sometimes you got to
right,
power your way through because of the length.
right,
And I don't want to do that. I want my books, and again, it may be the horror movie influence, but
mhm.
horror movies, there's a lot of them that are just very bad, right? But you still enjoy them because they're
Right,
entertaining. And
right,
that's what I
yes,
want. I want my books to be just people entertain and enjoy it, and
mhm,
not have to put a lot of effort in it, right? They could just
right,
sit there, read it, and enjoy it,
and enjoy it.
and take a day or a weekend to read it, or either lunch break or whatever, but not have to spend
Right,
weeks to be able to get through it.
right, and and I some of the best books that were ever written are novellas, right? The Great
Mhm.
Gatsby and To Catch Catcher in the Rye, and
Yep.
all of these books, they were small books packed with greatness,
Yeah.
and I think sometimes definitely when I'm reading some book, I think this could be have been really
Yeah.
compacted a little bit more to get the punch instead of a draw out of
Yeah.
sometimes irrelevant facts that will pull you out of the story. And
Yeah.
I don't know why. I don't know if it was because of print costs or whatever, but if it's going to cost this much, it better be thick, or what it was that
Well,
spurred on our social
you know what I
structure.
think? I think what it is basically, you know, writers in general, and there's no right or wrong, right? So I don't say either side is right or wrong, but a lot of times writers, poets, whatever, get caught up in the wording, right? And they get caught up
Right.
in the beauty of the words and the beauty of the language or the connection of it.
Mhm.
And sometimes they spend all this time describing something that could be done quicker, right? And it's
Right.
beautiful. And I'm not saying it's wrong, but to me, sometimes, like you said, the story could be so much tighter and cleaner without sometimes a lot of that extra. And again, I'm
Yeah.
not saying it's right or wrong, but and again, that's why I always talk about the author's voice, because I think again it's the horror movie aspect of my influence. But
Mhm.
when I do a lot of this stuff, you think about the old horror movies, you think about Universals with Frankenstein and all of those, Creature from the Black Lagoon, any of those, right? That you think
Right.
of,
Right.
a lot of stuff was suggested, right? It's not very clearly laid out. You think about Hitchcock and stuff,
Mhm.
because you didn't have the special effects. They couldn't do a lot of detail. And I
Right.
always believe that the reader is always going to do a much better job than I can explaining something, because
Right.
they know what they fear, right? So if I give
Oh,
them a
right.
setup and give them enough detail of the scene,
Mhm.
rather than me really just painting out that picture and saying, this is what the room, this is what it smells like, this is what it feels like,
Right.
they're always going to put a better picture in their mind than I could ever do, right? So
Yeah.
I like being concise to a point, but giving them enough detail to understand. And I always feel they're gonna put the rest in there, and probably the imagery in their mind is just gonna make that much better.
Right. Right. The imagery or a memory that they had
Yeah.
you know, where they were really scared and it would trigger that even deeper emotion in them than you
Yep.
articulating it to the point to now their memories and their fears are kind of being pushed out
Yeah.
just so they can concentrate on your depictions of it.
Hmm.
Yeah, I'm totally with you on that, and I think that's a it's a balance, right? Everything about writing is balance. What is your favorite part? And I think that people in general think that writing is just, oh, you sit down and write a book, but there are a lot of different parts to writing. Which is your
There's a lot.
favorite?
Um, so the easy answer is, of course, the storytelling, right? Because, like you said too, and I always just say the voices in the head, right? Those are the stories,
Right.
or the voices in the head. But that's the easy answer, because we do that because we love it. We love telling the story, right?
So
But
are you talking like the draft? Like getting the
I
story out?
just the process of it
Just
coming
the
out. So yes, it would be
right.
the draft, but the process of that story coming out, because again, depending on how you write,
Mhm.
you know, whether you're a plotter or pantser, but when you're more on, say, a pantser side and you just let the story flow, you're basically the first reader, because you're reading it as you go. You don't know what's going to happen. You're just
Right.
following the story as it flows out. And that's the beauty of doing this,
Mhm.
because you're a reader one, right? Because yeah, I have an idea what that story is, but I just let it
Right.
go where it wants to go. And that's why I never plot or really outline, because I don't want to restrict myself to what that end should be, or something in the story. I love that aspect of it. I love it just letting it go where it wants to go, and letting that story live on its own.
Right.
That's for me the most fun part. But I really do love, and like you said, you've seen my videos. I love that aspect of
Uh-huh.
just doing all these quick videos to show people ideas of what they are,
Mhm.
and give them different things. I do some that are funny, I do some that are more impactful visually, but I just
Right.
enjoy that, right? Because what's the hardest thing for all of us? Marketing, because we're trying to get somebody to find it. So you have to make that fun, right? Because
Right.
what's the hardest part of an author? Yeah, sometimes the stories are, the editing's hard, marketing, right? Because really, it's how do you get eyes on your product? And
Hmm.
sometimes, no matter what you do, it doesn't seem like anything's
It works.
changing.
It
But
doesn't move the needle. Yeah.
no, but you try to make that fun, and I love that aspect of it, of just coming up with different crazy takes or angles to say, look, this is what this is about. And
Hmm.
luckily, I've gotten good feedback from a lot of the videos I do, but it's just fun. That's a fun,
Right.
creative thing to do with it.
They really are good. And so those images, are those AI generated images?
So I have a mixture of stuff. So my cover designer, Betty Martinez from Reedsy, I've used
Uh-huh.
her for all my books, right? So she did the
Oh,
werewolf book, she did the zombie book,
show us.
and
Show
she
us your
and
werewolf. Show us all the books.
so here's the werewolf book,
Could you
and
back up a little bit? I'm only getting like
yeah.
a little. There we go. Oh,
Yeah, so
fabulous.
there's the front, and then there's the back with some more images of the wolf pack. And
Right.
basically, the reason I love working with her is she understands what I'm trying to do. And again, being an old horror fan, I always want my covers to look like old 50s drive-in horror movie
Right.
posters, right?
Right.
And
Right.
that's why I have the werewolf the way it looks, because for me, I thought that was art. The way they did a
Right.
lot of those old posters, it was just a beautiful look. And usually when I give her a couple of, I like, this is what I'm thinking, I just let her roll with it, and she does a beautiful job with it. Right. So that's the werewolf. The one that just came out, and I only have the proof copy right now, is Rise of the Z.
Right. So
But
you
again,
tagged me on this book in TikTok,
yeah,
and I was, jackassing around and not looking at TikTok. I hadn't looked for like a day, and I pick it up and I'm like, holy shit, what is going on TikTok? And then I pull it up and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm going to interview that guy.
yeah,
What a great cover. So keep going.
yeah.
Right. I think a
So
lot of people
again,
love it.
I wanted to look at, doing like a horror poster look again, and
Right.
she's able to capture that, and again with the back. So I always like it to tie in around the entire
Right. And the
cover,
spine. Show us the
back and
spine because I
front.
like the
The
spine too.
spine is the
Step by
best because all the blood
right.
splatters that I have
Blood.
on
Yeah.
on the book. So this is actually the second go around of the cover. Her
Uh-huh.
and I initially designed one that had like a off cream color border that had a
Uh-huh.
lot of blood splatter, but it didn't. KDP didn't really kind of like it loading it up. It didn't seem to come out right. So we
Right.
adjusted it
Oh,
and we
right.
did a lot more splatter on the spine just to give it that extra little aspect. Because again, what's the first thing that's going to draw in a reader? The cover,
Oh,
right?
the
It's
cover.
the imagery. So
Yeah.
you have to have something that's going to catch their eye. And I always like to have something different than that's on the market. My stories, I want to be different. My covers, I want to be different. So it's
Mhm.
always a different approach for people to say, hey, let me check this out.
You are so refreshing to me because I am the type of person that's terrified to step outside the line. If it's my line or an imposed line from other things, like it has to be the way that I think that everybody is expecting it to be. And it's horrible. So my next book, the novellas, I'm going to do them under a pen name so I can just have fun. I just want to
Yeah.
have fun. And I want to write those books the way you write all your books, just
Yeah.
free of expectations. Just write them for the fun. Just enjoy the process. And maybe I'll like writing better. Maybe if
Yeah.
I write more like you, I'll enjoy it.
That's always just been my personality, is that I like to push myself, right? I like to push
Mhm.
myself outside of the comfort zone, because again, the most growth is always going to be when you're not comfortable, right? When you're uncomfortable is when you start pushing yourself and doing things you didn't think you could do, right?
Right.
Um, but I've always been one that if I want to do it this way, even if it's not the way everybody else is doing it, I want to
Mhm.
do it. I want to see what happens, because if you fail, it's not the end of the world, right? You
Right.
you correct it and you figure out what you can do
Easy to
better
get
next time.
right. It's easy to fix a lot of those things. And nobody ever, 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 ever would define somebody as a visionary as somebody who always does what everybody else does. Right?
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. So you have been wonderful for my mental health today. Just go do it, have fun with it instead of all being all blocked up and, you know.
Because again, the reason I do the podcast, the reason I like to share everybody's work on TikTok and stuff, is
Mhm.
because when it comes down to it, we're all the same, right? Why do we do this? We do this because we love it. We do it because it feeds our soul, it feeds our heart. It's something we love to do. We're not doing this, unfortunately, because we're making money off of it, right? So we're doing this because we truly love to do it. And I appreciate when people do things they love and struggle with it, right? Because again, it's not easy. You're doing this, spending your own money that you're doing on your normal job and trying to budget in and spending your time and doing all this thing. I want to support that. So that's why I do my podcast and say, let me get you out there because, a lot of people I think forget that one person could have 100,000 followers, another person could have 10,000. But if it's a different 10,000 than the 100,000,
Right.
you just gave that other person that much more views to their product. So sometimes people get too caught up in the numbers and the popularity and stuff like that. Every person counts that you pick up. Every eye counts that you pick up because of word of mouth. Because somebody said, "Oh, did you see this? Maybe it's not the genre I like, but I really love the cover. I love the idea." And that all helps, right? And that's the thing. When you support everybody doing things like this, it's helpful because we're all in the same boat. We're all doing what we love.
Right. It's unfortunate in my eyes. I don't know when you hopped onto TikTok, but I have been on for probably 4 years, 3 or 4 years. And TikTok was an amazing place before they stifled people's views.
Yeah.
It was the reach was unbelievable. And now it's like, okay, I'm going to do this video. I'm currently stuck in the like 3 to 400 club, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people are stuck in the 200-ish club,
They
and it's
want you
just
to pay for the ad.
right.
That's
The
why they
ads.
do it.
And I
They're doing
have
it on
done that a
purpose.
couple times. I've done it and it hasn't moved my needle at all, because it's like, do you want more likes or do you want more this? And none of those things really, and there's nowhere to put it that says readers. It's like entertainment. And it's like, well,
Yeah.
that's a very broad spectrum. That covers anything from reading to visual porn. What entertains somebody? It's across the board,
Yeah.
So it's like, could you if you're going to make me pay this amount of money, could you put it in a very defined category? I want it to be
Yep.
readers of this age who like this type of book, Yeah.
Yeah. It's very general. It's like, do you want it more females or more males? And like, it, you know, why? Why is it that general, right? Or
Right.
do you want this age or this age? And like you said, it should be more in terms of the interest side instead of just a demographic. And
Yeah.
they're I feel they're being a little lazy with how they're doing it because again, it's too general. It's not
Right.
really pinpointing what you need to do.
Right. It could be so much better. I mean, I'm looking for women who have pets, plants, lots of books, and time on their hands. It's like those are my women. The single
Yeah.
women who just want a man to hang out with and whatever. So yeah, it's frustrating, and this app has a lot. It has you can put reels, or I think it's like a minute long, and I have some videos, but it doesn't have the stickiness yet that it needs to.
Yeah.
But they will never suppress um, viewer things and like that. They're like, no, we are anti that. You go, right? Whatever works for you, and
Yeah, I mean,
yeah, it's
unfortunately, they've done it
frustrating.
on all the social media
All
apps.
of
I mean,
them,
it's made it very difficult for anybody to do anything.
right? Yeah, it's impossible, and it's frustrating. But oh
Yeah,
well, what can
I
you
mean,
do?
the good thing on TikTok is there is a movement that's been growing to
Hmm.
support indie authors, right? Between a
Right,
lot of the book talk accounts, other indie authors. So a lot of people are making effort to support indie authors, share indie authors, read indie authors, and
right,
review indie authors. And it's a beautiful thing when you see it because that's the only way it's going to work. It has to be almost like a grassroots movement because
right.
it's not going to happen any other way because like you said, the suppression, the very general attitude they have until to ads and stuff like that. So
Right.
it's very very interesting how that works. And one of
Hmm.
the things is sometime in August or September, we don't know yet, but there's a bunch of us indie authors that like supporting other indie authors. And
Hmm.
one of them came up with an idea of like the old telethons where you see from PBS or where Jerry
Right.
Lewis used to do all the old telethons. and we're going to
Mhm.
have what we're going to call the live takeover, Indie Author Live Takeover. And we're going to either do a Saturday or Saturday, Sunday of
Uh-huh.
maybe an 8 hour block of lives back to back to back, different hosts. And in
Right.
those blocks of lives, we're just going to bring on indie authors to share their work, talk about their work, and people can come in all day long and
Oh,
find
how
it
fun.
almost like it's a book convention, right?
Oh
For
my
people to
gosh, can I
find.
get on that list?
Yeah, yeah,
I would love to be
absolutely.
one of the people that, like, interview people or whatever, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't matter. I don't even
So
really talk about my
I'll
books that
send
much, but I would love to.
yeah, I'll send you the thing because right now we're signing up the hosts, right? The live hosts.
Right.
And then after that is when we'll start taking on the indie authors to do it. But it was a beautiful idea she came up with, and that's indie author Ella Graff. She came up with
Uh-huh.
this idea, and I was like, this is genius because
That is
you
genius.
know this allows, and we have a lot of book talk accounts that
Uh-huh.
are behind it too. So they're going to share it. They're going to hop on, share it to all their
Oh,
readers,
yes.
and it's really a virtual book convention, right? So
Oh,
it's a way
right.
for all of us indie authors to get together like you would a book convention, but now we
Uh-huh.
can cover the world or the entire U.S. whoever's signing on to look, and we're
Right.
doing it a big enough block, so it might be like 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. Right,
Right.
and every host takes maybe like a 2 hour block, and who knows how many indie authors will be able to get on there to talk about that sign up. But
Right.
it's a way to get everybody out there. They get their little 10, 15 minutes to talk about their books, who they are,
Right.
because again, it's that connection to the reader that really makes it important. And
Mhm.
them seeing the author, hearing them talk about it, always is going to strengthen that connection.
Right. What a great idea. I would love to be any part of that.
Yeah,
Any part of
I'll
that. You
send
just
you
put
on
me in there
TikTok
and
the original
yeah,
one so you can see it.
I would love that. What's
Yeah.
what's one way that we can help support you as an indie author?
Um, of course, you're gonna always say read, right? Even if it's,
Right.
all my stuff's on Kindle Unlimited, so if you
Right.
have
Oh,
that, you don't have to buy my books or anything. But if you read it, the review's always the biggest help.
right.
Um, and I'm not one, again, it's another controversy. I'm not one that expects everybody to like my books. It's just there's no way to please everybody. So
No.
it's not going to hurt me if I get a bad review or a 1 star review or whatever, because you're just not going to appeal to everybody, right? But
Right.
whatever, because that should be something you can grow from and say, okay, maybe it's a review that's just completely different from everybody else. But what
Right.
what did that person? What was their aspect? What didn't they like?
Right.
Maybe think about that and say, is there something I could have changed or made
Right.
better? But
Yes.
so everything's about growth, right? So all
Yeah.
negative reviews are growth. It's not going to hurt your sales. Yeah, maybe if everything's not a 5 star, maybe some people are very almost like people that only buy brands. They look at
Right.
that and that's all they want to look at. But
Right.
most of the readers that are really interested are going to read the individual reviews and say, okay, they like this aspect, they like this aspect, and then they can make a decision. So
Mhm.
you can't take a bad review to heart. You're just not going to appeal to everyone. It's just never going to happen.
I want you to repeat that to me next time I get a bad review. Actually, I haven't really all the bad like the bad it's just like a star or two and they never say anything. I wish they would
Yeah,
say what it was.
it,
But
it
my
helps, right? It
book
would
is
help.
right, it does. It's kind of a critical critique. And sometimes your friends and your neighbors and the people that know you, they're not going to ever be that honest with you, right? They're
Yeah,
afraid of damaging that relationship. But a complete stranger, yeah, let me know specifically. And like you said, probably 80% of the time, their specific issue is something that, you can't necessarily fix. You can't write all your books the way they would exactly like them
yeah,
because then, 80% of people won't like them. But it is really informative. It's almost like a gift.
yeah. I
So
mean,
if
I'll
you're
give
gonna
I'll
give a
give you a
1
good
2 star,
example.
be specific. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll give you a good example. So the Temptation of a Succubus book, all my beta readers, right? Like I
Uh-huh.
said, they've absolutely loved the story. I have in the second chapter, uh, uh, it basically has a detective come into the picture because of the first victim,
Uh-huh.
and they come in, they're trying to figure out what's going on, and they start chasing these two, and they leave because the book takes place in Spain, and I have them leave Spain, go to Italy for a while, and then come back when an opportunity arises, right? And
Uh-huh.
everybody's loved the book, the pacing, everything, and they're all, some of them, maybe two out of the beta readers have said, I thought there would be more detective in it. I thought there'd be a little more story of the detectives, right? And I understand what they're talking about, but the reason I brought that in is I needed a reason for them to be comfortable in what they were doing, right? So I had to make it uncomfortable for them to flee the country, and then a reason for them to come back to be free to do whatever they want, right? And if I had the
Right.
detective chasing them the entire time, it takes that, like I said, my approach was no restrictions, no boundaries. You lose a little bit of that if they're always on their heels trying to stay away from the
Right.
detectives chasing them, right? So it was a conscious thing to bring it in to give them the opportunity to leave and come back freely.
Hmm.
Um, but I think if I go deeper into that, it changes that aspect of the story.
Right. For sure. For sure. All right, everybody, go read his books. I'm going to read the novella. I get triggered super easily. I have post traumatic stress disorder for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, so I have to be very careful about what I do. But I would love to read your children's book, and I think I could
Yeah.
try the Succubus book, especially if it's I don't have Kindle Unlimited, so but I don't mind
The
buying the Kindle
the
version of it
the
and then just
succubus book
putting my
is a
toe into it.
lot of trigger warnings, right? So
Does it
that might
right?
be one you're not sure of.
Yeah, you might
The
not
where
bring that
so
one.
my books are in stages, right? So the werewolf book
Right.
is very little trigger. Yeah, there's gore because it's a werewolf book, but there's
Right.
nothing super graphic, nothing crazy in that one. The
Right.
zombie book, I did go deeper because it's an apocalypse, right? And
Right.
one of the trigger warnings I have in there is there's toddlers and children that are
Oh,
killed and eaten and turned, which again, I know people are not going to like, but to be true to what the story
the
is,
genre. Right.
you
Right.
have to have that in there because it's going to happen, right? And I
Mhm.
always tell everybody, I hate when stuff happens to children too, in movies and stuff. Sometimes I won't even finish it. I'll just say I don't want to watch that.
Right.
But it has to be part of the book. It's going to happen. It just
Mhm.
it's not being true to what the story is if you completely avoid that
Right.
entirely.
That makes sense. That does make sense. All right. So you're saying start with the werewolf book.
That one's going to be the less triggering of everything. The zombie has a lot more triggering
I was
aspects in
kind of
terms
hoping
of
the romance part of
the
it would
horror stuff.
pull me through.
Well,
I'm a sucker for romance.
yeah, I mean, again, the everybody's loved the succubus book, but there's a lot of trigger warnings because
Right.
this is a demon and a serial unaliver, and
Right.
they're doing everything they want to do, right?
Right.
He keeps trophies.
Uh-huh.
He keeps trophies which is a specific body part, and
Right.
again, it's triggering, right?
Right.
He sexually assaults because he's a serial unaliver,
Right.
and his lover, best friend is a demon. So
Right.
they're going to do this over the edge. But I purposely put that, and I let even all my beta readers know,
Hmm.
make sure you read this because I don't want anybody, because everybody has different levels of trauma, right? And I don't want anybody to be triggered. So I want it up front, this is what's going to happen if you don't feel comfortable with it. I'd rather you not try to
Right.
do it because I don't
To
want
do it.
anybody to have any problem. And I have had a couple of people say, I can't do it. I can't
Right.
keep reading. And I was like, I understand completely. I mean, I
Right. Right.
purposely made it over the top, but I understand. I don't feel bad if somebody says, I can't do this.
Right. Okay. Well, that is good to know. So thank you. My
Yeah.
mental health thanks you. Well, thank you again for coming on and doing this with me. I so appreciate it. You are such a lovely person, and I can't wait to to see how it goes for you and see how I can help you. And let's keep touch on TikTok and
Yeah.
just keep doing our thing because I love how much you love to write. It's
Yeah.
very
I mean,
inspiring.
I've loved this as well. I love, like I said, I love chats with other authors and stuff like this. I just love
Uh-huh.
it. I love meeting you in person. This, again, a lot of us have a message here and there, but it's not the same as this. It's not the same as talking and seeing who the other
Right.
person is and what they're
Yeah.
about. But
Yeah.
I've
There's
absolutely
nothing
loved
beats
this. I
this.
really appreciated you reaching out, and seeing if I would like to do it.
Oh, absolutely. Go watch his podcast. Go read his books. Please review. Please, we're begging you. Please review this.
Yeah.
Right? Read it, review it. Thank you. All right. Thank you, friend. Have a great day. And I can't wait to talk to you again.
You too. Enjoy the rest of the day. I'll talk to you
All
soon.
right. Bye.
Bye.